Thank you. Thank you very much, Candace, for inviting us here. Sitting here just listening to all these stories, I'm going, man, yeah, okay, tick that one off, tick that one off, tick that one off. We've seen it all, and again, and again, and again. So my name is Mike Bostio. I'm with the Concerned Citizens Committee of Tyendinaga Environs, and we have been fighting first the Richmond landfill expansion and now the Beechwood Road Environmental Center. There seems to be a common theme here around this whole recycling, get ups, greenify it, greenify it. That way anybody who goes along with it can sleep at night. I'll give you a kind of lay of the land here. The red dot is where the site is today. The pink outline spot is Greater Napanee. The blue spot is Tyendinaga Township. The spot below that running down to the Bay of Quinte is the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte, and a little green spot over here is Deseronto. This blue piece of waterway here is the Beechwood, Marysville Creek, and the headwaters of the Marysville Creek are here on the site. The salmon, which flows into the Bay of Quinte, the Salmon River is just north of it, flows into the Bay of Quinte, and Sucker Creek, also just south of it, flows into the Bay of Quinte. The leachate right now emanating from the old leaking dump site is all leaking into these waterways, leaking through the groundwater into the Bay of Quinte. The Bay of Quinte, oh sorry. I hope everybody could hear that before. I have a pretty loud voice, so. The Bay of Quinte has been on a UN watch list since the 1980s, one of the most polluted bodies of water in the world. And here we constantly have these landfill sites that are located so close. I mean, that's only 6 kilometers from the Bay of Quinte, and it is polluting the Bay of Quinte today. And yet they propose building a one 4 times the size right next to it. The neighbors in the surrounding communities on that map are all on wells. We don't have any municipal water source, so everybody relies on wells for their water, like the Opal Alliance, farms, residences, etc. The rest of that, I'm not going to go over everything because a lot of the stuff is being repeated from earlier. I'll give you a bit of a history on the landfill. The site was first opened in 1954 basically it was a burn pit. In 1986, the first expansion approval was made for 125,000 tons of waste from all over Ontario. In the 1990s, Waste Management, the world's largest waste company, purchased the site. In 1999, they put forward their first Richmond expansion proposal for 750,000 tons of waste and 250,000 tons of contaminated soil to be used as cover. We fought, as Richard had mentioned, thankfully Richard joined us at that moment in 1999 and has been with us ever since. In 2006, as he had mentioned, the minister, Laurel Broughton, had rejected the expansion proposal, citing that there are significant environmental risks associated with expanding the landfill. For the next 4 years, we were fighting to close the Richmond landfill, which was supposed to be closed in 2003. Once again, a similar story that you've heard from so many others where delay, delay, delay. Stop taking garbage, and we'll delay it as long as possible. In 2008, the Environmental Commission of Ontario said that this is arguably one of the worst sites in Ontario to locate a landfill, and it should be closed immediately. He said the vertical and horizontal fractures in the limestone are like water traveling through a pipe. They go great distances in a very short period of time. So Waste Management in 2010 turns around and announces another terms of reference for another expansion proposal. It is the first time, from what we know, in Ontario's history where a company has lost an environmental assessment on a site and come back with virtually the same proposal in the same location utilizing the same technology. The MOE the next day issued a certificate of approval to close the existing landfill, and in 2011 the landfill was closed. Sorry, I guess I got ahead of myself there. So continuing on in 2012, the MOE approved the environmental monitoring plan for the closed landfill. And then they turned around and they approved the terms of reference for the new expanded environmental assessment for the new expanded landfill, the Breck. So once again, against all logic, here we go again. A small community against the world's largest waste company. Because the environmental monitoring plan was so totally flawed, our hydrogeologist, and this once again will be reminiscent of what you've already heard, our hydrogeologist had 17 recommendations for the environmental monitoring plan. Every single one of them were completely ignored. We never got one response back from Waste Management or the MOE. So we asked for leave to appeal to the Environmental Review Tribunal. And the Review Tribunal granted us leave to appeal. And in that leave to appeal, they said no one of sound mind would have given this approval to this environmental monitoring plan, speaking of the Director of Approvals for the MOE. So the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte have been our brethren in this fight right from the beginning, and they continue to be through this new process and with the Environmental Review Tribunal. We've been undergoing negotiations since that time for over a year now with Waste Management and the MOE the citizens. So we thought, okay, this is ridiculous. How can you keep going on this way? So we thought, well, what can we do to try to get the MOE to wake up and realize the errors of their ways? So we put forward this Environmental Bill of Rights application to have two changes made to the Environmental Act, to review the Environmental Act, to prohibit the siting of landfills on environmentally unsuitable locations, and repeat applications where similar proposals have been previously declined. Unfortunately, a few months later, the MOE denied our request to have the Act reviewed. So where does that leave us? Let me make this very clear, and as you can hear from everyone else at this table, this is not a NIMBY issue. This is an issue where local municipalities, provincial politicians, the Environmental Commission of Ontario, all of our 27 local doctors have signed 2 petitions, and many, many experts and thousands of thousands, tens of thousands of dollars have gone into hiring those experts, have all agreed that this site is unsuitable for landfilling because of the vertically and horizontally fractured limestone. You've got very little or no soil. And the whole region is considered a vulnerable aquifer, as you'd heard in Suzanne's case as well. There are many areas. Fractured limestone is a vulnerable aquifer. It doesn't matter where you go. But our whole region has been classified by the province as a vulnerable aquifer. There are a number of reasons why we put forward this EBR application and the request to reject the EA. But the MOE rejected our EBR, saying that the process works. But we say works for who? Imagine how we felt as a community when that terms of reference was approved for a second time. We fought the good fight. We followed the process, as everyone said you need to follow. We won fair and square, but yet here we are again, fighting another unnecessary fight on fractured limestone. It's insanity. But you have large corporations like Waste Management with very deep pockets that manipulate the legislation and move forward with applications that are virtually the same in the same location, and they can get away with it because they've got deep enough pockets to do so. No other reason. There's no other justification for it. They are manipulating a flaw within the process, within the legislation. If the legislation was strong enough, why are we today in an ERT process and another environmental assessment fight? We had to take Waste Management to the Environmental Review Tribunal to demand proper monitoring of this site that could have and should have happened years ago, right? And so what is this process revealed about this site? The landfill is massively leaking despite years of denial from Waste Management. Fragile aquifers are polluted with highly toxic chemicals. Waste Management is not in compliance with their environmental compliance approval. Carcinogens are found in off-site wells, including residential wells. And Waste Management has been unable to determine the extent of the leaks. Every single well that they have drilled in the contaminant attenuation zone so far is contaminated. Every single one of them. So we find ourselves now in a contingency situation. For years, we were saying to Waste Management, what is your contingency plan? What are your big plans, right? When we finally hold your feet to the fire and you have to admit that this thing is leaking off-site. Oh, we've got lots of them. Well, what are they? Oh, well, we can't tell you that. You'll have to wait until the process comes. So after we finally end up in this contingency situation, their only contingency plan is a contaminant attenuation zone. That means that they plan to let this site contaminate the groundwater, the Bay of Quinte, and people's wells for hundreds of years. They have no way to contain it. They have no way to remediate it, right? They've admitted as much, and the only proposal they put so far is a CAS. And now they want to build a site 4 times the size right next door to the leaking old site. And as it was mentioned earlier, and the whole plan rests on this liner system. Every liner built leaks, right? So if you're going to build a landfill, you don't build it on fractured lino, where our community is going to have to deal with further follow for hundreds of more years. You use Mother Nature, right? You build sites where Mother Nature can act to contain, remediate, or for natural attenuation. So what do we know about the site's characteristics, right? Highly fractured bedrock, groundwater flow is not understood, it's difficult to monitor, it's leaking uncontrollably, and it's difficult to impossible to remediate. So in conclusion, we have the legacy of one leaking dump that Waste Management have no solution to fix. It's not right that we should carry the burden of another leaking dump nearly 4 times the size that will eventually further contaminate our community for hundreds of years. Richmond is the perfect example as to why the BREC is a bad idea and why the EBR application was put forward. A flawed process and flawed legislation of why we are where we are today. If we leave the legislation as it is, that will allow deep-pocketed corporations to manipulate and abuse the weaknesses in the legislation, and small communities like ours suffer the consequences. When Minister Jim Bradley was last in this role in the 1980s, mid-1980s, he made a lot of positive legislative changes to the Environmental Act and is touted as one of the better Ministry of the Environment that our province has ever had. We are hopeful that being back in this role, he will finish what he started. Maybe he'll call it JB2. But Minister Bradley has the opportunity to do the right thing, to cement his legacy as the best Minister of the Ministry of the Environment that this province has ever had, by making changes to the legislation so that other communities will not have to unnecessarily go through what our community has gone through for the last 15, if actually since 86 people have been fighting this for 25 years. After 15 years, we would like to stand down from our apparently essential role as the watchdogs for this entire situation. Leaky land is still a bad place to have a dump. Thank you.